Hello. Hi, I'm so glad to have you joining us for this episode of the Enneagram and Marriage podcast. Today, I'm so grateful that we can take time together to live and walk out how to live a joyful, value-centered life this season and beyond. I'm extra smiley today as I share this topic because it's been a busy summer full of a lot of good things. It has been fast paced, and I have found some time to slow down and do an episode I've been meaning to do with you so that you could take time to look at your life, whether you're listening summer, fall, spring, winter, wherever you're listening, to really align yourself or realign yourself with healthier, cleaner living and values, and to emerge with greater joy because you've taken this time to do some big picture as well as micro changing. So I'm so geeked out to get to do this with you. Thank you so much for joining me on today's journey. I'm so grateful you pressed play. This is an episode you may want to take with you for the ages where you can come back again and again when you need new shifts to make sure you align yourself. And I'm leaving you with a freebie in the show notes as well so that you can balance out your instincts and desires with me. So you'll see that and you will hopefully get to use that anytime. I shared that a long time ago with my collective and my clients, most of them. And I am so glad that you are having this chance to use this worksheet as well if you need it. So I am so glad though that we are here together today to walk through how you can walk to that more valued centered, but also intentional life of joy. Because I know right now you may be in a space of saying, I'm busy, Christa. What are you talking about? I can't see past today. I have so much going on. It's all fuzzy. It's all, crashing down on me, the ways we can all feel at times. But generally speaking, if you're working on yourself and your family and with intention, doing certain rituals, you're going to have more success in life. And I just want to help you to get there today. And I want you to know that's a place of privilege and not everybody can get there. There's no judgment. If you're like, I can't do any of these things, I'm just here for a listen. That's okay too, friend. I'm so happy to share this with you so that maybe in a future season, you may say, this is a goal of mine to get to have the space to live a little more intentionally. Right now, I happen to be in survival mode. And I just want to name that because I think it's a bit pompous to say everyone can do this right now. And I certainly can't do it all the time either. So I'm in a space where this is my job is to actually teach. And I'm so grateful and blessed to do this job. But I want you to know I get it. If you're like, girl, I am here for the listen. I am here to tune into what's helping you through this. But I'm going to just pause on taking it for myself later. But hey, if you're here ready to work, ready to change, ready to bring more joy and value-centered living in your life, you are in the right place. So that's what we're going to do today. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how to do that. Even bigger picture for us to know where you're at in the world. We've just finished some of the bigger pieces of the Olympics. So excited that Simone Biles just named one of the biggest drivers for her life, living out a life of intention and joy, has been her daily therapy during the Olympics. How beautiful. I wrote about it last week in our, if you're on our email list, I said, hey guys, just pay attention because I'm remembering last time when Simone needed a mental health break. And here she's like, hey guys, I've taken Lexapro. I've had to walk out my mental health journey. And it's just beautiful to be able to hear that. I love when people reveal their secret sauce. That's what we're always trying to do here together, is be as real and deep as possible, right? So it's so cool to see that that's a big thing in the world right now. Here in my neck of the woods, we have Tropical Storm Debbie beating down on us a little bit. My dog is frightened. I've been trying to give him some little bits of allowing him that sense of you're safe, but I also know just some of you may struggle with anxiety. If you have a pet like that, then they sort of have to face their fears, also take little rides in the car, and we're fine otherwise. But when we have our little guy feeling anxiety, we all feel for him because we've all been there. So we are otherwise staying as dry as possible. Wherever you are in the world, I wish you the best. We're in our hurricane season, and this is pretty mild as far as that goes. But prayers sent out for those who are in flood zones and all over the world, wherever you're at, whatever you're dealing with. I hope you're having a good time in your world of weather too. But other than that, we really want to remind you before we get started, on value-centered living, joy living. That one way we're doing that ongoing is through our monthly meetings with our collective. And today is actually my last day for doors open for that. So I'll tell you more about it at the end, but I just want to remind you, because I know that if you're listening live, the doors are open only for a week at a time, just because I really like to focus in that group. And I'm thankful and excited that this Wednesday we'll have a chance actually to meet and talk about really deep diving on finding our values. So grateful, excited, and want to welcome you to that. Now, as we look at how you're going to very much build on what you're doing now already, there's not going to have to be all changes in your life to build a joyful and value-centered life. You may even have a lot of that going for you already. We're going to stop at that base root level where you examine what your deepest values are. And sometimes people don't want to do this just as a verbal exercise. You can also ask people around. If you're a compliant type, like a 1, 2, or 6, you can say, what do you think my biggest values are? Or if you're somebody who's in that space of being really aggressive, assertive, you may feel like you know your values, but when you stop and pause and really allow some breath work, you might even find values you didn't even know you had because you slowed down. Or if you were withdrawing so much, you might need to really get activated in your doing space to allow yourself to notice what is driving me. And I like to think of the analogy as a tree sometimes, and a mountain, whichever you like, whichever suits you. But if we're thinking of a tree, what are your roots, right? Deep roots are not touched by the frost. We know this from Tolkien language, but what I really like to remind you here of is, what are the driving factors in your life? And one way of figuring that out is to ask yourself, what would you want written, even if it sounds a little grim, on your obituary? What would you like to be in the newspaper for? What would you like to see a headline about you on? What would you like to see just said about you posthumously? I think that if you had just 24 hours left to live, what would you like to be doing? Some of this can drive your values. You may say, oh my gosh, it's family, or it's writing, or it's, I must leave a legacy. I must make sure that I have saved money for my people. Whatever it is, I want you to think about what some of your values are. And it could be big or small values. But if we're ever going to live a value-centered, driven life, we're going to need to know what your values are and allow you to come into a grapple with that so that you can make that part of your everyday life. So that's my first little assignment to you. And if you've been on our Deeper Dive Wednesday podcast, you've been doing this with me all month in various ways. We've had all kinds of exercises going. That's part of our collective too, if you need that. But I just want to allow you some space to think about it, even to pause me if you need now for a minute to ask yourself, what are the deepest roots holding me together that I really need and I rely on, and I'm not willing that they be cut off from me? That is very critical. These are the pieces of you that are so important. And like I said, they could be silly, like, I am, my ledge to die on is I love Star Wars and I must have it every week. It just really is a cool story that has been a narrative in my life that good versus evil, there are so many ways we might live out our values, and I'm not going to judge you. Whatever your true value is that is a virtue in this world, because I know each individual personality type, we all have some different values for joy or for order or for protecting others. But I hope that you will invite virtue into your values and not make them just sillier values, because some of those are fun, but just to ask yourself, like I said, wow, what would you like to be known for in the world? What would you like your legacy to be? How would you like to be influencing people season after season, long after you're gone, that seeds had been planted by you because you did something good? So that is the roots of your life. And so if you look at your life now, on the one hand, do you see your deep driving values on the other hand? Do you see that how the two can go together? And if there's nothing similar and it's just two parallel lines, like, oh my gosh, I'm working over here and doing all of this and that. Maybe I'm noticing I'm scrolling and I'm not being intentional. And then over here, but these are my deep dive values. Then what I want you to do is, as we do the rest of these exercises together, as we look at your desires and what's driving you on a day-to-day basis, and your instincts, I want you to start trying to align with your values and really look at that headline of what you want your life to say as you look at your daily practices. So you can make sure that instead of being two parallel lines, they're actually perpendicular. They cross, they intersect all over the place. And you find yourself motivated more because you're living a value-centered life. Guys, that's where joy comes in, where your daily practices align with your values that mean the world to you. This root system is driving forward with the essence all the way up through the branches so that you can serve out in a beautiful way. So I'm going to share a few of mine along the way and then ask you at the end of today to walk through yours. I'll ask you some pointed questions. Once again, when I do that, you can actually pause if you want and just answer them here and now or write them down for later. But I'll share some of mine to put some life into it together. And I'll talk at the end today about what we've got ahead on the pod. Just to spice it up a little bit, I will say that one of my self-pres values has been allowing myself to do some self-pres with my family while they're having a bit of social time. You probably, if you know this podcast, know that I love my quiet time, and I'm more right in the middle of introvert extrovert. I've called myself an introvert on this pod. What I really mean when I say that is, compared to most people in my family, that's what I am. When I do my Myers-Briggs, I'm just a little bit extrovert. So thank goodness in a way for that, because I'm surrounded by so many extroverts. But we talked, Melody and I, on this podcast last week about how we had seen the 3 summer movies, Twisters, Inside Out 2, and our fave Fall Guy. I didn't tell you, we'd also seen 2 other great movies, Despicable Me 4 this summer, The Quiet Place. This allowed me to have a value of mine, which is deep family time, but also a little bit of time just for me to sit in the dark theater and not say anything. It was so healing. Oh my gosh, I loved it. So I love laughing next to my family. I love knowing we were all taking in good things together and caring about others as we looked at the narratives and talking about it afterwards and making even more meaning together, as well as our silly fun. But also, one of the ways that I've been able to lean into this system of the value of joy and bringing that into the first desire I think of when I think of the Enneagram is the instincts, and that is the self-pres instinct. I think of how you start your day. And I just want to remind you of that, how important it is. And one of the ways I choose to start my day is with the word peace. Ever since we had the wonderful Holly Oxlander on the pod where she shared that. But also, I like to start my day with gratitudes, because sometimes you can get that assault of anxiety, just like, whoo, the day hit you. And just instead allowing yourself an override to say, oh, here's what I'm grateful for. You invite positivity into your life. You really do. When you say, I'm empowered, or I'm so grateful for this, you will allow yourself, instead of this knee-jerk reaction or instinct-driven, oh my gosh, scanning for negativity and problems, you allow yourself to come into your day with lightness, with joy, and with the ability to move forward versus getting stuck. So don't forget, if that's a similar value of yours, to add in some positive waking up ritual to your day as you're looking at how to merge values and joy. Now, I've also added in on this level personally a little bit of reading just for pleasure. And when I say that, I'm taking a big step to read things that aren't my typical, because I will tell you all day long, I'm reading for pleasure when I'm reading psychology and when I'm in my element reading about the brain or something with relationships, right? You know, that's my favorite space. But I really have been getting a different kind of self-care, as we learn from Dr. Sandra Dalton Smith, when I allow my brain a little break from all of that, quite honestly, and all the theory. And I have just allowed myself to read some very cool books. And one of them has been a very simple book, Love on Lexington Avenue. Oh my gosh, so silly, but also just very sweet rom-com sort of book. And reminder to you, if you need a sweet book like that, that was a really good one. And I really am grateful. I was on my actual book touring and I picked it up when I was at a Books a Million, and I was like, you know what? This book is so chill. I just felt peace when I picked it up, and I'm like, I never read anything like that. And I told Wes about it, as I usually tell him about the things I'm reading. Not all, of course, that would be overwhelming, but some. And he's like, you should read more like this. And I'm like, I know, this is so good for me. Of course, I also grabbed the World War II, The Nightingale, and I'm in that as well. And that's still different from just my typical relationship reads. Also a book on trees and how they communicate to each other in nature with scent, etc. And so I'm allowing some different movements in my ways of refreshing myself, so that I'm not always reading about how to help couples and how to theorize for couples. Sometimes I'm just living in that moment in fiction or in another time era to read. But something else I've been watching for and paying attention to in my self-pres is not just reading. As you may know, and maybe true for you too, sometimes reading is just a way of life, right? And so you're just thinking reading is living, it's breathing, but I've been really convicted that sometimes I'm so much in my five with reading that I'm forgetting to live. And so for instance, with this, I was recently at an amusement park. You guys know Florida families, especially with teenagers, you get your Florida passes, you're an amusement park family. Sometimes that's totally key for teens usually, and that's where the youth groups go on all their trips. And I know other states too. Like I remember when we were in Michigan, Cedar Point, so big. You're like, yeah, shout out, whatever yours is. I know you're thinking of it right now, but last summer, I remember looking through the Jane Austen letters and really scouring them while we were in these long lines. And this summer, one of the days, I remember I started to do that. And I was like, what are you looking for, Christa? Let's take a big values picture back. What are you looking for? And it was to know more, to get these nuggets. Just, I want to know more. So very five space work. And then I realized like I was finding the tiniest nuggets, you guys. I wasn't even finding much of value at all. Her letters, quite honestly, are very, just like probably my emails come across, sometimes just very boring because I'm not thinking somebody's going to be looking at these posthumously. And so I guess I'm just thinking about how like, could I be interacting and engaging with my family who is like using one of those phone systems where you're like putting it on your head to do some sort of a charades? Or do I need to be scouring for Jane Austen deep dive in my self-pres right now? And I was literally finding like one nugget every 20 pages. And then I'd share it. And it was honestly something I already knew. So what I'm telling you guys is if I lost you, come back to me now. I know this wasn't that exciting of a moment, the Jane Austen part of this, but really allowing us all to realize when we're dipping so much into our self-pres and trying to find knowledge that we forget to be present with the people around us. So just be careful as you're doing that, but allow yourself the good parts of this instinct of getting to know yourself. I've also been doing guided journaling this summer that I found super helpful. I've been reading the Proverbs, which I have loved. That's almost, I want to say, my favorite book of the Bible, but it ties with a few others. But that is just a great book of the Bible that I love. If you share an interest in the ancient texts or my faith, it is such a joy to read through because there's so much wisdom and knowledge. And it reminded me, Krista, write out more than read. Sometimes you're reading so much, write out what you know, share what you know. Like these Proverbs are sharing these wisdoms, pieces of wisdom. So I'm grateful for platforms to write on. If you know me on Substack or have you read my book, you know I love that too. My other books in the past that were self-published, that is a little bit of a better space for me when I'm in this instinct because it's time where I'm learning, but I'm also sharing, not just taking more and endless information in. So that's been good for me. Also, as far as wellness, this is a part of you that you might be ignoring that you can look at too. And I've been really enjoying continuing wellness as well, guys. That's not going to go away if you're ignoring it. You have to ask your body, how's it doing? You have to take time to listen. And that takes intention and it takes slowing down. So we had the minimalist mom on our pod, Diane Bolden, and I hope you've been following her as well on Instagram or allowing yourself to come in for the self-pres instinct on some of these minimalistic sort of patterns where she may say, you know, erase 5 emails a day or unsubscribe from something that you're not using, or allow yourself a chance to put away what you started and allow yourself to get actual wellness in terms of fitness and notice what's healthy for you to be eating. Something I began doing a little bit better on this summer was noticing portions. As a 7 who struggles with gluttony, portions are really good for me because they keep my energy, but also help me to find what's good for me. So getting a prepackaged salad at the grocery store is such a win for me as long as it has protein, or something, even if the kids are wanting something like Chick-fil-A and I'm like, oh yeah, I'll get a kid's meal with a cup of water. Like something where I'm not a larger person who needs a whole lot more that I can live with and also feel like, oh, I got to have a treat too. But I'm not hurting my body the way that I used to when I wasn't knowing about portions as much. And I was just self-soothing with food, which I did so much in my high school and college years. And even as I was having babies, it was like, oh, have all this food, have all this protein. And I just ate that right up, quite literally. And so now I'm learning at least about noticing my body and what it actually needs. And I don't know if you're familiar with some good podcasts, but of course, Dr. Mark Hyman and Dr. Huberman Labs, they have great lessons for you on free podcasts on just how to eat clean. And you may have your other favorites as well. But I just want you to be more active versus passive in this instinct. Um, and allow yourself to come into that space. I do have my fun. I love one of the other things saving my life is still my oat milk chai tea lattes from Starbucks. I usually get a tall with extra ice just because I'm like, girl, you can't have that many of these all the time. But it is so fun to have your treats and to know what works. Or Poppy prebiotic drinks. I love those because they have a special type of fiber for healthy bacteria in your gut. Like, find your good things, find your minimalism, find the ways to stay present with your values and your self-present instinct. Now, take a deep breath and come back to me if I've lost you on your self-present instinct. I hope I haven't, but I hope you can also start formulating some of the tips you want to bring into that. And now we can move on how to bring joy back into the one-to-one or sexual instinct. So something I've been doing in that one is leaning into my spouse and seeing what he likes, what he needs. And there's a lot of value if you share that value of loving others as you love yourself. And you just heard me say how to love yourself really well, but how do you love your partner really well when you lean into their values and what matters most to them? And something that came up for us recently was Wes really loves sharing his gift of theology, does not get to do that a lot, has a master's from Wheaton in it. And we were asked to teach one of our classes at church again that we've taught 2 times in the past. And he was ready to go. I thought he'd say, I'm too busy. And I was like, I'm good either way, because I love you. If you want to do this, I love doing this. I will do my Pure Barre class at a different time before church. I just need to get my energy out at some point in some way. And so we've been reteaching a class on Sunday mornings before service. It's been great to see him in his element. And I told him, I have so many platforms from which I get to share. This is yours, but I'm right here to support. And then, of course, being a 7, he's like, you totally talked a lot too. So I'm like, yes, I did. But like, it is your baby. And so like, take this time, take the lead. It's a joy for me to just watch you mostly and then step in, of course, with my counseling and coaching types of things where I always end up doing that. But like, you get what I mean? Like, I'm still going to be me and I'm still going to be present, but also intentional to let him take something that is his and grow it. And he's like, oh yeah, I'd love to do the next courses where he could go deeper into his theology gift. And I'm like, I'll probably be able to come to most of those, help assist you with most of those. And I think that that's a really cool way that I have been trying to lean into that instinct is, what do you feel passionate on? And that's what you can ask yourself about your spouse. Once again, I'll say a few things at the end for you, but even right now to brainstorm, like, what is something that you can just support them on and encourage them on and make space for? Something I've been also supporting Wes on is poetry, because he's got these poetic apologetics where he spends a lot of time chewing on something deeply meaningful and profound about the truths of life that he has been able to learn across his 45 years. He just celebrated his birthday this week. Happy birthday to him. But also to just encourage him in that. I know when he had his birthday, we bought him a Mary Oliver book on poetry. And because I know he often feels guilty about stopping and pausing and allowing himself to learn if it's not super type 1, like absolutely productive right now, I just allowed him, like, here's our food for the day that we made, and let me read out loud to you from your Mary Oliver poetry book. And we read 3 chapters today, and then I allowed him to hear 3 of the poems and the poets she recommended, because you and I know I will do that kind of work and that deep dive for my authenticity driver on Myers-Briggs, for my 7 exploration. And yet he won't always do that. He'll be more in the, let's go to the movies, we should read our Bible, we should, there's a lot of shoulds there. So it's been beautiful to say, you're allowed to use your gifts, and let me show you a way you can hone your gift. And that is something that you have to be gentle with. You can't force on your spouse. You have to look for those windows, but that's a great way to lean into loving them well. Again, you can't do that at all seasons, right? When you're like, oh my gosh, we're literally in the thick of crisis. So I said, this is a good podcast to note as a favorite, to save it, and maybe even email yourself about in a month and say, come back to this podcast. Don't miss it, because I want to do that when the in-laws leave or after school starts or whatever it is. I just don't want you to forget loving your partner in this way. I also want you to know to have fun together. We've continued our date nights. That's been a great space to really look at each other, not just the kids or the theology or the craft together, but to actually say, what's going on with you? What's going on with me? And allow ourselves to connect in that way. And sometimes even, like I said, walk and talks. You know how important intimacy is in this space. Learning how your spouse functions best around that has been a great topic we've covered on the podcast as well. And I just want to make sure you don't miss those episodes where we really get going on that topic for you to have your sexual health together as well. So please keep listening to those episodes if you need it as well. But that's something that I want you to make sure that you either plan or gently find rhythms or routines for, and continue to nurture in whatever ways you need so that you don't lose it, whatever season of life. You've heard me say it recently. Having couples in my field of view all the time gives me the opportunity to say those who ignore that instinct really don't have a good marriage usually. I have not seen it work. And I used to be a lot more lax, like whatever's working for you. And now I'm learning this does not work for people. You need a connection. And of course, if you have a spiritual connection that bonds you even deeper yet, and that might be one of your values, like it is mine, is sometimes faith is hard and doubt comes in, but allowing yourself that opportunity to explore that, even when the doubts come up, to be able to say, can you pray for me? I've had some doubts around this lately, or I'm struggling here. And hopefully your spouse can say, everyone has a mature night where they process, like, and when I say night, I mean like night of the soul, where you actually make your faith your own. And maybe sometimes in different seasons, as you've heard me say, you still might struggle and be a bit of that Thomas who says, God, show me. And I feel like God has been very faithful to my lack of faith and shown me such a living faith that is undeniable. And that's why I do stay close to the Bible every night and love to share it. So, and to connect with people here who are just thinking, I struggle sometimes. I get that. I've been there, and I sometimes am there, but overall, just having a living faith is gorgeous. And to know that Christ is the center of my life, even when Wes and I in that one-to-one instinct are struggling, it's something I can go back to as this deep root and know who I am, where my worth really comes from, and share from that space versus wondering, oh my gosh, am I accepted? Am I loved? Because you guys know how painful outgrouping can be from a spouse, even not just a group, but your family especially. So knowing your own roots, your own worth, this is a very important spot for all of us. And also nurturing that one-to-one bond in the ways of sexual life together, deep conversations, bringing in some surprise. And I also sometimes have to check, like, is the surprise going to be something my spouse wants? So I'm learning that too. Like, I was like, Wes's birthday. Okay, I could do this one kind of a surprise, but I don't think he's gonna like that. I better check on that one with him. And sure enough, he didn't. We just ended up having a more chill date night for that particular time of the birthday. But on other parts of the birthday, I had learned, and if you've read my book, I've learned he does want a nice gift because he worked really hard. And so we were able to gift him with some really nice things. So just kind of learning, like, how do I bring in surprise element? Where would a surprise actually hurt us? And knowing that is so key. In fact, he gave me a 5-year ahead plan that for his 50th birthday, he would love a 50th party with friends from all over. So I'm like, oh my gosh, 5 years will go by fast probably. So it's good to plan a little ahead for your one-to-one too, and know where will we be in a little while and plan for that too. Don't stop dreaming together, in other words. Okay, so if I've lost you there, once again, come back to me, and I hope I haven't, but make sure you are looking at your one-to-one. If you're looking for joy and values, make sure you allow yourself to say, what are my values? Hopefully you have a value of fidelity, that you really want to love your partner and you love your spouse to that level of, I'm not going to be sexual with somebody else. I'm not going to allow myself that temptation to cross into my life. And the reason I say that is because people are kind of going wild out there nowadays. And it's so important for you to allow yourself to come back to your core values, and allow yourself to see, how does my family function the best? And that's either when I'm here stable, or if I'm married, that we're also stable, etc. And here's how we're going to get stable. You've heard me fill in the blanks, and I'll ask you again at the end how you're going to do it. But I hope you're already formulating some theory on how you can shift a little bit to make yourselves more healthy and to make sure you don't leave any of this out. Because now we've come from the roots up, we've allowed ourselves to nest a little bit in that self-pres. We've kind of branched out to see a couple of visually here in our picture Hannah's been making of this. We have our little birds on the branch of this tree for taking some time out, the love birds. But now we're branching out even more to see, how are we going to affect the world socially? And that's sometimes on your own, sometimes together, but where your values come into joy is when they meet your desires of what you like doing and what you're good at doing, and also this season of life, of course, but also just allowing yourself to live that out, even if it's just a few minutes a day. Even if you say, girl, I am so tired, I have to do the things I have to do, I don't have much time for what I want to do. I'm just reminding you that it's also okay to see what you're actually good at and gifted at, and allow yourself a little time to spend in that area too. So maybe you're just all day, I'm a cashier at a grocery store, but every night you love painting for just 10 minutes while you watch your favorite show, and you have a really cool paint by number and you know where you're going to put it in your living room. Like, these do not have to be huge things, but it's where you're allowing your gifts to share with your family, the world, people who come to see that beautiful painting. That could be such a small but beautiful way of sharing in the world. Also today we saw we were sitting at the table and I was reading Wes, the Mary Oliver poems. And one of my kids said, one of my other kids, my type 9, Melody, was giving a little bit of her money. She obviously doesn't have that much. She's only 16 years old. I know that's hard to believe because she's always on this podcast, like already talking like she's so much older, but she was giving a little bit of her money to a charity. And my other child was saying, like, I love that example. And she was doing it really quietly. And I think that that's another way of social giving for those of you who feel like your social doesn't, like, maybe you're like, I don't know about my social being that huge. Although Melody happens to be very social, sometimes the way we give is quietly and without others around. And so keep a wide view on how you might find that joy with your desires. Like, I'm bringing world change. I'm branching out. I'm allowing people to see my gifts and to be touched by the fruit of my life, but I'm also allowing myself to be zoned in on where I'm actually interested or gifted. So that's a key thing. And how I've been doing that a little bit this summer is, of course, you probably know I've had my time with my podcast interviews, sharing about my book and about this work I do. And I will actually also share here in the show notes where I have been doing over 50 talks. I'll see how many Melody gathered for me. I think about that number, but just over this last, not quite full year, but just allowing myself to really put those together and say, here we go. Here's a lot of talks that I've been able to do. This is the way I've socially tried to share. And also now going to bookstores has been so fun, or contacting. Melody has been doing that for me this summer as a social media guru over here, allowing ourselves to just have the summer fun of getting out there. Oh my gosh, how fun to do the book signing, but also to take time to see it on the shelves elsewhere. That is such a joy to see the work going out that you worked so hard for, instead of just moving on, but allowing that. And I'm so excited also socially to be supporting friends with as much order as I can bring. So excited. This week, actually, Ariel Curry's book is coming out, Hungry Authors. If any of you are out there, we have a couple writing podcasts, including one with her coming up, and her co-writing author. But I'm really grateful for you to get to shift with me to write your story out or your dream book out, if that's one way you want to shape the world. So I can't wait for Ariel's book, Hungry Authors, to come out this week, this Tuesday. So if you're listening live, you can grab it anytime now, because my copy is physically arriving on Tuesday. So I know that's very exciting already. That's tomorrow if you're listening on Monday. So anyway, very excited for shaping the world through my friends' work as well. And also knowing how to have really good meetings as part of this. So maybe you have social life, but you haven't been very intentional with it lately. So just picking back up where you left off. Sometimes they say no really quick. Like somebody asked, would we come and do our murder mystery dinner game for a big event? And I just shut the guy down right away. I was like, no. And then I didn't even talk to my business partners about that. I just was like, no. And then later I realized I should talk to people. I should take a deep breath. But I felt so busy, like I need to help couples, that I felt like I had to say no. But I also have been learning when to say yes. And I think that's okay to give ourselves grace around, like, we're not perfect with it yet, because we have to be intentional with what relationships we can help. There were so many graduations in my life this summer, so many things happening. One of my best friends is having a baby, and the friend Carla, who introduced me to the Enneagram. I have been just inundated with so many different things going on. And last night I had a dream that two of my friends were vying for my attention, and that I was trying to please them both. And then they were both mad. One of them was crying. One of them had done a surprise visit. She was crying. And I just took this deep breath, like, oh my gosh, like I want to love my people well. So some of that is, of course, back to Proverbs, a person of too many friends can come to ruin. So I'm muttering this around the house, and Wes is like, you're going to be okay. And I'm just like, no, I know. But how I've been intentional is my local staff. I took several of them out for coffee. One of them, I'm still waiting on connecting with her, but just one-to-one coffee. Tell me how you're doing this summer. We all work individually. Let's see. Another way I did that was some of my clients some of them are desperate for in-person, and I don't do in-person anymore. And I made a special morning when I went in for 3 sessions, and I had a wonderful time, like seriously wonderful time, just going into my office, doing in-person sessions. It was a joy to do that. And then I came home for a couple of podcast interviews, and it was just so fun to do that. But I'm saying that because sometimes you'll stretch yourself around your social battery, and you'll stretch too far. And I want you to know that it's okay to be imperfect here as you're trying to balance. Life is never a perfect balance, because I remember that day I was like, oh my gosh, of course our air conditioner went out that day. Of course, and you might even hear me talk about that in some of my podcasts, because it was like this weird 1 or 2 days. Here in Florida, like that is no joke. But all that said, just making intentional time with the people you care about that you might not have had time to do in one of the other seasons is your way of socially branching out and doing that intentionally. A couple of other people, we just had Zoom coffees last week. That was fantastic. And then maybe one of the biggest times of my summer, and if I'm honest, even of my life, and it's hard for me to say that because it's so serious, but it's true, is I had been mentoring some teen girls for many years. You might have heard me talk about them, the Rewired podcast girls. There was this beautiful group of 5 girls, 2 of them, Hannah and Melody, my kids, and then 3 others that most of I've known for 8 years plus, some since kindergarten. And the other 3 girls, outside of my 2 girls, my girls are in their college and high school, but they are the other 3 are moving out of states. One's to North Carolina, one to Tennessee, and one to Ohio. And they are type 4 and 2/8. And so we had them over. We were thinking of what could we do. All the schedules were all over. Personalities were all over. And they actually just said, you know what? We're all coming over to your house, Miss Christa. Of course we are. We're coming to crash your house like we've always done over all these years. And we're going to just have a fun sleepover. And I had so much fun with them. And we planned a really special time, because we knew this is like the last of my chance to really mentor them all together in a group. Like we hope for the future, but it is the end of the summer. It is the end of these relationships being local. And I know when they come home at Thanksgiving and Christmas, they're going to be with their families, because they were already like, it was hard. My parents are wrestling with me to stay home. And so I knew that it was so special to have them with us. But all that to say, we had a meaningful, special social time where we had the communion together. We took communion together. We prayed together. We also made it light and fun. Of course, my 9 was in that lens. We watched Fall Guy. They loved that movie. They had ice cream. I let them go out without me. I was like, go do that part without me, because I need a break to just pause. And they also allowed themselves to just have some silly time doing PowerPoints for each other. And I made one for them too, with like their future Jane Austen and bows. But they made a really funny one. Like one of them made the Kardashians, and they were like, we're all the different Kardashians, just for being totally silly sleepover stuff. And I was Chris, the mom. And then a couple of others were like, here's a murder mystery, and here's something that we all have in common. None of us are dating, and here's why, and just really silly reasons. But as I hope you can hear the flavor of this meeting, it was a really intentional ending, and allow ourselves just a space to make sure transitioning went really well. So it was, as I said, a little tough, but I knew it was worthy. And just as I was sending them off to ice cream, I got a couple of texts, like one from a client who's the same age, and she's like, I passed my beauty school test, and thanks for all your help over these years. I've been seeing her for 8 years. And then somebody else was like, can you speak at my mom's church? And I just felt the shifting social piece so much then. And I'm like, yeah, I can do that in February. And I was really excited, but also a bit wistful to know sometimes our social gifts change. And so that's really the crux of our social instinct, is using our gifts, even though it's tough sometimes, but right where we're gifted, right where we're aligned with our values, which me, if you've been listening to this podcast a lot, I value very much compassion. I value very much rest. I value grace. I value grit. and faith, and just pouring all that into these girls was my joy, and my clients, and nurturing love in their lives, and offering them a space to be real and deep, but also allow them joy, and pouring out for the future and peace. I try to bring that 7-4-9 piece to them, and know that they're bringing things to me, and you're bringing things. We're all bringing things, right? But knowing what my values are and bringing them out. Yes, it's frustrating sometimes, but most of all, there's peace and joy when I'm living correctly in that and taking time to rest, just as I did when I said, hey, girls, go get your ice cream, have some teen time. I'm going to go lay down and rest and allow myself a walk and to answer a couple of texts and just breathe. And I took a bath too, just to get a total break for a little while there too. So allow yourself to come back to all three of those instincts, and you will have more value-driven joy in your life. I promise. But I also want you to know that it's so critical that when it is just a time of survival, that you don't try to ascend the top of the mountain. Just allow yourself to come back to those more bottom rungs and roots and say, okay, let me just try everything I can to hang on to my values in this hard time. Let me try everything I can to just put on a rest each day, knowing I'm going to be doing something less fun right now. And that's okay too. We have those seasons of just solid grit. And I want you to be brave for those too. Sometimes it's just that season. But don't forget these wonderful rhythms. I have a freebie for you in the show notes. And I want to let you know that we have our collective open right now. If you just need some actual connecting time with me, if you want my empathy and compassion on your exact story, which some of you may need, then we have a $29 a month collective. That's the price right now. It's very low. And that's intentional because it's a place for you to do your own work, but also know that you don't have to stay. You can cancel anytime, and it's not going to cost you as much as coming for individual therapy or coaching, which I also invite you to. But it's just important that you allow yourself to know, yes, I can do even deeper and more nuanced work when I take on one of these programs than in general. And everyone's budget's different. So I want to make sure there's options for all, or you could do both. But digging in is so important. And that's been such a joy to do with my clients, with my collective. And in that space, we are also working on, as I said, our values. We're also working on spaces for, I have a couple of quizzes I'm sharing with them. We're working on cognitive functions, interpersonal dynamics when we think of our internal family system. This is all coming up ahead in my collective, as well as, the mental health summit is coming up. That's still in the show notes. I still have the hidden chapter of the Enneagram in marriage if you're just looking for those sexual tips. And here on this very podcast up ahead, we also have so many wonderful guests ahead. We have Lauren Zander. She's been a life coach to Dr. Mark Hyman and to Hugh Jackman. We have an Old Testament scholar, Sandra Reichert, who's been actually part of the NIV Bible translation team. We also have Tanner Olson, type 3 and a 3-5 pairing, who's sharing his testimony on how he's walked through infertility and adoption with his wife. And I'm just grateful for all the work we're doing right here, lining up with values, with joy, and also lots of grace for when everything falls apart a little bit, right? So take a deep breath with me. Allow yourself to ask as we end these few questions to yourself about your life, so that you can also make sure that you're living with authenticity, and more importantly, your values and your joy. And that is what is helping you to thrive on that self-preserving lens. And the worksheet will help you too in the show notes. What rituals every day do you need for connection with your spouse or partner that are going to help you, or every week? Getting those on the calendar. Making sure that you allow yourself practices to support your social life and friendships well on the one-to-one and on the group level, and allowing yourself to shift if you notice, oh, I have too many things every night, that's not going to work, or I need a boundary here or there. We have so many resources for you at Enneagram and Marriage, past podcasts, but also just the reminder all the time for grace, for grit, for growth, and for lots of deep breaths as you do this work. So those are the questions I'm leaving you with. Don't forget the collective. Don't forget the mental health summit. And most of all, awesome job today. Take that deep breath with joy. Take a butterfly hug time if you need, and just give yourself a huge pat on the back for walking through your life with intention. I hope you truly find your values and your joy as a result of your time spent here with me today. I'll talk to you soon.